Hey, good morning. Good to be with you here in 1 Samuel 18. What we're going to see today is the heart of a true friend. We get to see these two pictures of friends, one of Jonathan, one of Saul. And as the Lord starts to raise David up as king, he starts preparing him for king, and he's moving Saul out. You see the decline of Saul and the increase of David. But David gets close to the house of Saul. We see that he starts to play the harp or the lyre for Saul whenever he's tormented. We see that during that time when he's in Saul's house, that he becomes close friends with Jonathan, his son, Saul's son. So in verses 18 or verses 1 through 5 in chapter 18, we see that he comes into Saul's house. He's playing. They just develop this close relationship between Jonathan and David. Then Jonathan made a covenant with David because he loved him as he loved his own soul, and stripped himself of the robe that was on him. It would have been a royal robe, so David was coming from humble beginnings, and Jonathan's giving him this nice robe, and his armor and even his sword and bow and belt. So we see that Jonathan really loves David. And we get that close. We get a good picture, a picture of a good friend here in Jonathan. He's revealing that he's not threatened by David. He supports him. He supports him in what he's doing. He supports him in however he can so that David can succeed. And not only does he want him to succeed, but he says, I'm gonna follow you, David, to where the son of the king would have usually been pretty jealous and said, you know what, I want to be the one that leads in battle and takes over as king. Jonathan, he doesn't feel that way. He really loves David and supports him. And on the other hand, though, we get Saul. And when we start to look at Saul, we see that Saul reveals to us what a fake friend or a toxic friendship looks like. He uses David to make himself feel better. We see in verses 2 that he takes him from Jonathan's house, or Saul takes him from Jesse's house, David, and he doesn't allow him to return because he likes how he plays the lyre. And then David, he went out and was successful wherever Saul sent him, so that Saul set him over the men of war. And this was good in the sight of all the people and also in the sight of Saul's servants. So not only did he do that because he saw his talent, it's because it made him look good. He was jealous of David's success instead of supportive. In verses 6 through 8, we see when David returns, they sing, Saul has struck down thousands, but David has 10,000s, and Saul's very angry, and this displeased him, and he said, they have ascribed to David 10,000s, and to me only thousands. And what more can he have but the kingdom? And you see his jealousy welling up, and he even seeks to destroy David as David's playing the lyre for him. He throws the spear at him several times, and he does this a couple times. I'm not sure why David hung out, but he was faithful to the king. We see this in verses 9 through 11, 17, and verse 25, how he seeks to destroy him. And even all of his attempts and all of his schemes, even though they failed, instead of humbling himself and saying, man, I've really treated David poorly, and I'm going to humble myself, I'm going to ask forgiveness, he's just consumed with anger more and more and more. We see in verses 28 and 29, when Saul saw and knew that the Lord was with David, and that Michal, Saul's daughter, loved him because he marries Saul's daughter, Saul was even more afraid of David. Saul was David's enemy continually. And we could use this to assess the relationships in our own lives. But many of us are not ready to hear what David does, because if we're looking, a lot of times we like to read scripture, and then we look at others and we say, okay, this is what this should mean for them, right? We don't want to say this is what this means for us. So if we're looking at our other relationships and saying, are our friends Jonathan's or Saul's, then what we need to hear, if we're going to do that, is that Jonathan continues to serve Saul. He doesn't cut him out of his life. Saul sought to destroy David, but David still humbles himself. He still follows Saul. He still takes up for him. If you just think this is like Christ, who, while we were still sinners, died for us. But instead of lashing out, instead of cutting Saul out of his life, David cries out to the Lord. Many times throughout the Psalms, you can see how David is crying out to God that he would do something, that he would intervene, but he does not take over. He does not take vengeance in his own hands. He waits for the Lord to do this. And this passage really reveals to us how we wait on the Lord in vengeance, how we serve and even love our enemies. So if that's how you're going to use it, that's how you can see, learn from David. This is how we love our enemies. But it also reveals to us our hearts in friendships, in our acquaintances, in our lives. We need to ask ourselves, am I more like Jonathan or am I like Saul? Do I use people to get what I want or what I think I need, or am I seeking to build them up in everything that they're doing? We should always be trying to build up others. So we would do well with this passage in 1 Samuel 18 to go through, to look at these friendships and to search our hearts and to see how we treat our friends and even how we treat our enemies. So I pray that this shows you how friendship looks, that you would cry out to the Lord. I know in my heart I want to be more like Saul than David, but change my heart. Help me to be a good friend, Lord. And I pray that for all of us. So God bless. Have a great day.